Hi, welcome to the Shepherd's Rest Doc Talk. I'm Cam. This is not Julie. This is Fern again. Julie will be having to do her part B by herself, and I'm having to do part A by myself. This is episode 163A. And welcome back. We're not doing the podcast, as you can see, mainly because it is a headache. And we don't have time for this. Nobody got time for that. We've got to write a book and do all this. So anyway, we're just going back to good old YouTube, and we thank you so much for having the patience to watch us. Hopefully, if you can download us on YouTube, or just catch us on Facebook, that's fantastic. And we hope that it accommodates your needs. And if not, we're sorry. All right, so we're going to be looking at the third Torah portion. Let's look at Genesis 12 to Genesis 17. This week we're going to tackle this Torah portion a little bit differently than in the past. You know, while really trying to understand the order in which the Lord puts things. You know, He puts things in a particular order for a particular reason. And if we look at Genesis 10 and Genesis 11, we know that when you read it, if you read chapter 11 and then, or the first part of chapter 11 and then 10, then you understand where these nations are being split, how they did their division. But I came to the realization this week, why it's the way it is, or maybe not why, but a reason that would fit in my head. Let's put it that way. You know, we have the nations in chapter 10 being set up, and then in 11 we have where they're divided, and then we go only from Shem's line and the royal line. And Shem's second son in chapter 11 is the one that we see the line through. Actually, if you look at chapter 10 verses 22, you see that Shem's sons are listed, and it's the third son that, I can't say his name, is the one that we find in chapter 11 where the line starts, and that would be in 11 verse 10. And that's where we see that. And it's not his first son, but this is the chosen son. This is where the line of Messiah is going to come. This is where the line of Abraham's going to come. Now, I did math in my head, and I came to realize, wait a minute, if the numbers that are presented as the norm, the flood was in 1656-ish, and the Tower of Babel was in 1996-ish. This is going from creation and then counting year 1, 2, 3. All right, so we're not working in BC. We're not working in any of those. We're going from time of creation on. So if we go with these numbers, then what happens is we actually have the math of Abram being born around 1948 from creation, which means that he is approximately 50 years old, give or take a year or two. Okay, so give or take. So we have Abram about 50 years old when the Tower of Babel is happening. Okay, now maybe for you guys that's not mind-blowing, but it's mind-blowing for me. Suddenly I'm like, oh my gosh, I get why this is in chapter 11. You see, we're seeing the division, okay? We're seeing where nations are being formed. And Abram is called out to be a nation. We see in chapter 12, verse 2, it says, "And I shall make you a great nation, a blessing, and bless you, and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing." The whole thing in what just happened in chapter 11 is Nimrod is trying to make a name for himself, right? He's trying to be a great nation. He's got all these cities that he's ruling, and he's expanding his area. And the Lord is basically like, halt. I'm going to show you who I'm going to choose to be in my land, and who's going to end up, what kingdom's going to end up ruling the entire world. In other words, Nimrod thinks he's going to move out and control it all. And the Lord's like, no, I'm going to move out and control it all. However, the timing of man and the timing of God are so different. That's why we have to wait. And we're still waiting for the perfect time, right? So that all can be brought in who want to be brought in. Abram has children from all lines. With Hagar, we know that he has from Ham. From obviously Sarah, this is from the line of Shem. And then we know that when he marries Keturah, that's going to end up being the line of Japheth. And I probably said that wrong, but that's okay. But we have in chapter 17, with the promise of the nation, if you notice in 17 verse 4, he says, as for me, the Lord, look, my covenant is with you, and you shall become a father of many nations. Yeah, all three lines and then spreading out. Do you realize that when they take the linguistic basis, I guess, and they divide it down, they come into three main languages? So I'm going back real quick. So when we look at the Tower of Babel, we don't know how many languages. We don't know if 70 broke out. Actually, I could say 70 didn't break out because there weren't all 70 of those nations were not necessarily thriving at that time, right? Some of those kids weren't even born yet. I mean, Abram well, that become nations, let's just say that. They're not to the age yet that they would be a nation. So we have right here in 17 where we see nations, we know in 12, the Lord's telling him, you're going to be a great nation, right? And so I start to see there's going to be the promised seed that goes for a nation. But Abraham also is going to have seed in every nation. You know, we always want to say, oh, I bet you if you went and did testing that there's probably Jewish blood throughout the entire world. There probably is. But you know what? So is the seed of Abraham. The seed of Abraham was called before circumcision. It was by faith. But remember in chapter 15 that Abram goes out, he first says, okay, you promised me to be this nation, to be these great people. My seed, I don't have a seed. All I have is from Eleazar, this guy from Damascus. I mean, I guess, what about my seed? And the Lord's like, no, it's going to be from your seed. And then he takes them out and he sees the stars and he sees the story of Messiah, his seed. All right, there's the story of Messiah. There's Messiah as the seed, right? But in him is the body of Messiah, little seedlings. It's the same idea as the rock, right? And Messiah was the rock, and then there were the pebbles, right? Abraham has the seed, which is Messiah, and then we're the little seeds, okay? So again, when we see him talking about his seed, I love that because it's leaving it open that all can come through. All those lines he's had that have gone out to be many nations, his seed can come and join the promised seed and still be brought in. Again, Isaiah 54, right, where Sarah opens the tent pegs and all the nations come in. Going back to Noah's whole thing in chapter 9, where Noah basically says, look, everyone's going to come into the tents of Shem. Right? You're going to come in as a friend like Japheth, or you're going to come in as a servant like Canaan. But you all have the invitation to be there. Just what's our role and how do we choose to function in that? By how close we choose to cling to him. And that's the Lord. So I want to just talk about this nation idea and the timing. If we look at chapter 12 as the beginning of the birth of a nation, then we might be able to follow the story on a more superficial level, but I think it helps us understand the deeper level. And that is, what are the things that you need for a nation? In order to build a nation, you need to have a king or leader. You need to have a common language. You need to have money. You need to have land. You need to have subjects, right? And by subjects, I mean maybe not servants, but those who are at least willing to be under the leadership of whether it's a king or a president or however the nation chooses to do it, one who everyone recognizes as a leader, okay? And we have this in chapter 12, where we see in chapter 12, 5, it talks about that, and Abram took Sarah his wife and Lot his brother's son and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the beings whom they had acquired in Haran, and set out for the land of Canaan. And they came to the land of Canaan. So here we see there's already subjects. There's already people who want to follow him, who want to leave where he's been told to leave. Now, there's some very interesting things as far as this goes. We don't know who these people are, but here's what we do know. There has to be a commonality, and that commonality is I'm willing to go where the Lord tells you to go. So kind of like Ruth and Naomi. Naomi would cling and go wherever Ruth would go wherever Naomi was. Here we have these people saying, you know what, Abram, I see God in you. I see something in you. Remember, he's 75 when he leaves. If the Tower of Babel happened at around age 50, that gives him 25 years of actually learning how to walk in the Lord, what it looks like, and deciding that, God's going to be the leader of my nation. He decides to go in the ways of Shem. Now remember, after the Tower of Babel and they scatter, that's not a quick, like the lights turn on or roaches run. It's a migration pattern of people moving apart. You have people who have joined themselves with Abram and are traveling with him. It's just a big group. So, whenever they go down to Egypt, it's not just Abram and Sarah and maybe Lot and a few. No, this is a lot, because by chapter 13, this nation, right, Abram comes back with more goods and possessions than what he had when he came down from Haran. When he goes down to Egypt, they provide for him even more, right? We had the incident where Sarah's taken and then Sarah's given back. You don't want to mess with another nation. Here's the thing. If it was just Abram and 1 and 2, while Pharaoh might have been really concerned about doing something against the Lord, there's also a large contingency that he may be concerned about, and that's the people that are traveling with Abram. He might recognize him as a growing nation, okay? And in that growing nation, he might see the potential of getting hurt and not wanting to be more in a treaty with him than actually being enemies with him and giving his wife back, giving Sarah back. So anyway, so they collect these goods, they collect this wealth. All right. So then when we see in chapter 13, not only does Abram have wealth, but Lot, they have so much wealth that they have to separate. They have so many riches, and by that I mean by people following them and also by their herds, okay, the men working for them. In that society, what was considered great wealth. So think about that. When Lot goes into Sodom, of course they want Lot. Here's a man with great wealth. Let's bring him in. The same idea as we see in Shechem when Jacob arrives, and Shechem and the men there are like, yeah, let's make a treaty. Look, they're very well off. Kind of that same idea. So both of these men are very blessed. Yet that nation divides. So now we have Abram with his group of just like-minded people, okay, who want to serve God. And, I find this interesting too in chapter 14, again, thinking like a nation. Abraham goes after, as a kinsman redeemer, as the idea of, you took someone from my nation, I have to protect them. The U.S. does that, right? We just had that event with the pastor over in Turkey. A nation will go to fight for its residents. So here we have Abram, who has Lot, one of his residents or one of his citizens, who is in a foreign land, who has been taken hostage. So he goes and he gets his citizen back. Well, in the meantime, he saves a lot of other people. And so then we see later on in 14 where you have the king of Sodom saying, just give me all the souls. And we always say, oh, that's like Nimrod. I would absolutely agree that is in the spirit of Nimrod. But let me suggest something else when we talk about the nation. Could it also be as a leader and as a king? Because remember, he was being conquered by and overrun by someone who had been controlling them. Could it be that he's also like, look, I need my subjects back. If I'm alive and I'm going to return to my land, I need my subjects back. Okay? Because we don't see anywhere in the text where Abraham refuses. Abram actually in 14:22 basically just says, but Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted my hand to the Lord and the Most High God, or El, the possessor of heaven and earth, not to take a thread or a sandal strap or whatever is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich. He doesn't even talk about the people. He doesn't keep the people. Again, nation building. This nation says, Sodom is like, look, I just want my subjects back so I can go back and rule. Is that a terrible rule, like very oppressive? I don't know. We don't know that. Okay. But we do know later that Sodom becomes a terrible place. But we don't know at this point what the king of Sodom is like. And I'm not going to assume. But I do want to say in 14, we see in 14:13 that Abram has made a covenant, has gone into covenant with an Amorite. So I find it interesting in 15 where we see where the Lord says the sin of the Amorite is to be fulfilled before the nationhood of Israel is given the land for all to recognize as a stating nation. That the sin of the Amorite has to happen first. So then when we go over to chapter 16, now we see this, that Abram is like, okay, I'm just this little baby nation. I don't have any of my own seed to be king, right? We have God chosen. We know what's going to be the land. The land has already been promised to him. And did I already say riches? If I did, he has riches. He has people following. He has everything he needs. Okay, he is a super friendly host nation. It is said that he would bring people into his tent and into his camp, and that he and Sarah had an open tent. They loved ministering to other people and sharing the riches and loves of their God. Okay, for others to learn, which is probably why they had their nation group just kept growing, because people are like, I would love to serve this God. I like the way you have things set up. I like these rules. I mean, isn't that what we're told in Deuteronomy that Israel's going to do? That they're going to be that nation, right? So that people in Deuteronomy 4 will look at them and go, wow, what kind of nation has a God so near? Abraham's walking this out in the infancy that just matures into, well, when Messiah is here, right? And then eventually it'll mature into eternity. Okay, so anyway, in 16 we have where they're trying to hurry it up. However, the Lord in his infinite understanding does not allow for Sarah's bad idea to become the promised child or take over. He allows still, he's going to honor Ishmael and let him be a king of nations with his 12 sons, but he's not going to let him be the promised seed. And then we see in 17 where now it's kind of all coming together. Ishmael's been born. He's not going to be a son of the covenant. Again, that's the line of Ham. That's going to be the ones who are going to be servants. It's a whole different thing. And now we have the first to be born under the sign of the covenant, circumcision, is going to be Isaac, who is going to be the heir, the to be king, right? The one who carries on the seed. And he's the one that is going to bear the name, one of the name of the fathers, right? Because it's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then in the rest of 17 is just basically setting up for what's to come. It's setting up that there is now not just a nation, but there's going to be nations. There's not just going to be Abraham, this one nation is Abraham from your nation. All nations will be blessed. All nations will have the opportunity to come in, and all nations will have a little seedling, a little dropping of your seeds in them in order to give them the ability to say, we too are sons of Abraham. And last note, the first time we see El Shaddai is in chapter 17, and the last time we see El Shaddai is in Revelation 21 when we are in New Jerusalem, because that is when the promise to Abraham will be totally and completely fulfilled. All right, so there's the nation. That's the land, the kingdom that we want to be a part of. I hope that you guys enjoy reading this week's Torah portion as you look for how to become a proper citizen of what the Lord set up, and our King, Messiah, who we are eager to have rule in our lives now and in the future. I hope you guys have a great day, a great week. I look forward to seeing you next week. Shalom.